Hello everyone, I'm Alex Russo and I'm a science fiction and fantasy author. Today we are going to look at a franchise that has seen a resurgence in recent years known as Dune. We're going to be dissecting the qualities of the book's main antagonist, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, and see why he's the quintessential vile villain and how you can apply these tropes when crafting an irredeemable antagonist in your story. So, the universe of Dune is a bit post-apocalyptic. An interstellar society is built upon human potential and capability following the abolition of artificial intelligence and the limiting of computers to the elite of society. Because of this, it has created niches for different schools of thought in life, each one pulling the societal strings of the empire of the known universe for their own benefit. Two of the most powerful schools of thought rely on a substance known as the spice, which is a smart drug secreted by a species of large worms native to a desert planet called Arrakis. Because whoever controls the spice is the true ruler of the known universe, the position of planetary governor on Arrakis is highly competitive and lucrative, as the royal house who rules it is reluctant to surrender its power. This conflict drives the story of the first book. House Harkonnen rules Arrakis and sets a trap for a rapidly rising royal house known as House Atreides, which threatens to rival the Harkonnens and the royal house of the Emperor. Once House Atreides is lured to Arrakis with the promise of governorship, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen sends his military forces, along with help from the Emperor, to ambush the royal family and loyalists, forcing the heir apparent and his mother into the desert of Arrakis, sending them on a path that could enable revenge on House Harkonnen, or leave them to die in the wilderness and let the conspirators remain victorious. What I want to start off with when discussing Vladimir Harkonnen is the decadence. Harkonnen is depicted as something like a robber baron since he rules an industrial planet named GD Prime, and the book depicts a scene where he decrees that the entire planet be refurbished before a procession from the imperial government arrives. This suggests that the entire planet is a slum or is in disrepair, which both the David Lynch and Denis Villeneuve film adaptations of the novel capture well. In comparison to the commoners within the empire spanning the known universe, or even other royal houses such as House Atreides, he also lives decadently. His library is described as having exquisite furnishings such as large floor-mounted globes and unique pieces of technology, which are absent in the lives of the commoners and even some of the royal houses. Moreover, the first chapter Harkonnen appears in describes him as being so obese he can only move around due to a special jacket, pictured in the image on the left, which showcases his unchecked gluttony and creates a sense of physical apathy. These descriptions, alongside words the author uses, create a horrid visualization, eliciting a sense of disgust from readers. Continuing on with his grotesqueness, he also maintained an exotic, well-kept garden on Arrakis, which was a world where water was so scarce that the inhabitants wore body armor that recycled their own urine and sweat in order to keep them alive. Because gardens, especially those in the desert, require a lot of water, this action, coupled with his gluttony and overly luxurious residence on GD Prime, further shows his overly decadent lifestyle and hints at a lack of compassion for his subjects. Next, I want to highlight his lack of a moral compass. Machiavellian theory states that it is greater to be feared than loved, the ends justify the means, and a leader should exercise draconian control over his subjects to maintain power. I would say this accurately describes Harkonnen's way of ruling. The book mentions that he keeps a stock of psychopath advisors from a mysterious planet that he commissions for his military strategy. He keeps his subjects on Arrakis in check through fear, and the movies show his family as carelessly killing off certain individuals for no reason. This creates an image of harshness and dystopian control. When it comes to the ends justifying the means, I think the book is pretty self-explanatory. In order to accomplish his goals, he partners with the Imperial Royal House and a clan of Space Marines to eliminate House Atreides. In the Dune universe, a private company has a sole monopoly on interstellar flights. Because of this, he has charged the proverbial arm and leg to transport this vast army to Arrakis. At the end of the battle, Harkonnen has a late-night conversation with his nephew Rabban, the former governor of Arrakis, whom he reappoints following the exiling of the Atreides. He He tells him that even if he squeezes the entire spice supply from Arrakis for a few years, it will barely cover the transportation costs, and he orders him to be hungry like him in order to accomplish this goal. While I'm sure being the planetary dictator of an industrial ecumenopolis and having family connections to the planet where the substance backing imperial currency comes from gives Harkonnen substantial wealth, the immense debt he incurred from buying the transportation for the soldiers shows that he will stop at nothing to accomplish his goals. As far as draconian control goes, he has a hatred of the natives on Arrakis, an ethnicity of humans known as the Fremen, and seeks to control, if not eliminate, them all because of their nomadic lifestyle and warrior society, which rivals even the power of the Space Marines in the known universe. Additionally, he orders that all lesser nobility on Arrakis be killed, so as to eliminate potential rivals when House Harkonnen reassumes control of Arrakis. Most science fiction tends to stay alongside commonly accepted tropes such as aliens exacting subhuman cruelty, or antagonists who are evil because they want power, or have a similar goal as the protagonist but different ideas about how to achieve it. However, while Vladimir Harkonnen espouses both of these tropes, he also has strong base desires and is just pure evil. Within the book, he is described as keeping various harems of slaves for his own indulgence, and for visiting relatives to exploit when they visit GD Prime. While the book refrains from going into too much detail and keeps the discussion about it to a couple of dialogue lines, this is not hard to believe given that the events and dialogue of previous chapters have established him as a ruthless dictator and his men are just as evil. Additionally, Harkonnen also has no respect for life. In the book, he takes one of the Atreides' advisors for his own, and attempts to secure his loyalty by implanting timed-release poison into his cells, leaving the advisor under Baron Harkonnen's thumb, since he is the only one who can provide the antidote. Moreover, his captain of the guard is addicted to some sort of a drug, implying a similar situation with him where he is able to fulfill his cravings, as long as he does his master's bidding. He also was able to use mind control in order to turn one of the members of the Atreides' inner circle, and had seated a spy within the walls of the royal residence on Arrakis with a device used for assassinations, in an attempt to take out the Atreides' heir apparent. He also celebrates death in a sadistic way, as when Feyd-Rautha turned 18, he arranged a gladiatorial style of event for him to win, and taught him about different poisons he could use on bladed weapons. Moreover, the ones Feyd-Rautha fought in the arena were actually prisoners of war from House Atreides. I might also add that the David Lynch adaptation takes this a step further by having him maintain a solid grip over the inhabitants of GD Prime through an implant known as a heart plug, which, when removed, causes an individual to bleed out. Finally, I just want to touch on his insecurity. While we tend to feel sorry for insecure characters, Vladimir Harkonnen has proven to be so disgusting to many, if not all, by this point, that we feel he ought to be afraid for his debauchery. In the events leading up to Feyd-Rautha's coming-of-age ceremony, he has a discussion with a confidant of the Emperor, who is somewhat counterculture. He decides to have this in a hall where there's a lot of people. The catch is that it took place within an area surrounded by soundproofed force fields in order to keep the conversation private. Afterwards, he worries that he might have let a little too much out about the conspiracy to destroy the Atreides, and the book mentions he clutches armored pillows in his limousine on the drive to the arena. While I've heard of politicians and some terrorist leaders riding in armored cars before, the fact that he keeps armored pillows as furnishings within his transport shows how insecure he is. This insecurity highlights that he knows what he has done, and while he lacks guilt for it, he is worried about possible vengeance. While secrecy and security are priorities for heads of state and wealthy industrialists because they are easy targets, and can make many enemies through their actions, the fact Harkonnen takes privacy and self-protection to an almost comedic level in the book shows how frightened he is. And frankly, he ought to be worried. I might add here that Feyd-Rautha even conspired to kill him at one point, although the plan failed miserably, and the confidant that he had turned in the Atreides' inner circle had double-crossed him by implanting a poisoned tooth within Duke Leto Atreides' mouth, in an attempt to assassinate Harkonnen. So, what can we learn from Vladimir Harkonnen in order to craft an irredeemable villain for your story? First of all, showcase character traits that would be undesirable in your fictional universe. If writing a post-apocalyptic story in a high-scarcity world, have a decadent, careless, and stingy antagonist. If writing a fantasy filled with magic and hard-working individuals, have your antagonist work to hoard all magic and responsible individuals for his own nefarious goals. In writing a military space opera novel, have a commander who throws highly trained super soldiers into battle like they're expendable in order to achieve a victory no matter the cost. These are only some of the ideas you could use. Second, have him be pure evil. While antagonists come in many different forms, one who is purely evil for the sake of being evil will have your audience hoping for justice. If you have concerns about pushing the envelope too much because the genre you write in and your target audience has established guidelines about what is acceptable to depict in fiction due to age, using multiple accepted tropes within these genres and age groups for antagonists will accomplish the same goals without upsetting or angering your audience. Third, have him be downright terrifying. The appearance, actions, and paradigms of your antagonist will help a lot with this. Lastly, while Frank Herbert had Harkonnen realize that he would be doomed if his actions came to light, I would say play around with this a little more because each story is different. If your antagonist is like Harkonnen, such as a subordinate under a more powerful master, I would say keep this anxiety, especially if the master was powerful enough to exact punishment. However, if your antagonist is in charge of his own actions, I would say have your antagonist feel no remorse and limit his concern to when he realizes the protagonist is starting to win. And that is all I have for today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy videos on character analysis, here is a video on how to craft a complex protagonist and the playlist for other videos in this series.